colleague from biology, Joe Trackey, and Joe's title is Improving Engagement by Using TED TV Videos Without Showing a Single TED Video.
Thanks for
Sure.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you guys are like me, you like building things, making things, or taking what has been built and what you built and improving. And you're always searching for ideas. That's what I do. I search for ideas, try to find these ideas on how to build stuff, improve things that I've built, improve things that are already built by other people. And I come from a long line of builders. My grandfather Trackey built houses from the ground up, and he didn't do plans most of the time. He did it out of his head. My grandfather Lepan ran a cast iron foundry and bronze foundry, aluminum foundry, and they made parts for these big paper machines and things like cannons. So if you go to Fort William Henry in Lake George, the majority of the cannons at Fort William Henry were made by our family, by my grandfather. And he, to my understanding, dropped out of school in 8th grade, but still held a patent on some fishing equipment. And so I'm a big fisherman. I'm constantly making fishing equipment. And so I've been a builder. I've been around builders. I love building. My mom and dad make stuff all the time. What's the inspiration? What do you build? You need some inspiration to build something. And so I'm going to talk about how I use TED TV to sort of get these ideas and move them forward. And I'm going to show you guys the videos, but I don't show videos too much in my class. I show 2 TED TV talks a whole semester, and that's it. But what I've done here is look at what's going on in these videos and try to apply it and change my class up a little bit. I'm sort of in an environment where you don't see something you build. You can build a course or a class or a program, but to me, you really can't get your hands on and see it. But I still like to build stuff, so I always build it. So the background behind this is I didn't know what TED TV was until I did a conference. I can't remember where the conference was. I know I went with Linda Crow, and the way it worked was we were presenting. It was a national conference, Society for Science College Teachers, and it was one of the first that I did, and so I was nervous. I didn't really know what to expect. And I figured out later on this is how Linda and I will do work at every conference we present at. We got on the plane, we finished the presentation that we were going to do that day when we landed on the plane. We landed, ran to the hotel, dropped off our stuff, and went to our presentation at the hotel, and didn't register for the conference. We didn't have time. We ran in and presented. Of course, when you get there, what happens is there was technical difficulties, so a 20-minute presentation went to 10 minutes to present, and everything that we had rehearsed on the plane, we had to chop and get rid of a lot of it. And so I was exhausted. And on top of it, they put me on different allergy medicine before I left, and I was having an allergic reaction to it. So when I got back to the hotel room, I just crashed, and I sat down on the couch, and I turned on the TV, and the first talk that I have up here is by J.J. Abrams. And he was talking at TED, a TED conference. I'd never seen TED before, but I knew J.J. Abrams because he had developed this show called Lost. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Lost was a TV program, and an airplane went down, it had survivors that were on an island, and it was like a magical, mysterious island, and they had numbers that would repeat, and for 6 years, this program kept my wife and myself entertained. We couldn't wait for it to come on. It had a lot of engagement in it, and he was talking about how he created this and created the engagement. And so I started watching the first video. I'm going to show you little bits and pieces of the videos. I'm not going to tell you how I use them. So I've got to go back and forth. I'm sorry. I'm going to play it for a little bit. If I leave it like this, is this okay for everyone?
I want to start today, here's my thing, hold on, there we go, hey. I want to start today talking about the structure of polypeptide. I get a lot of people asking me in terms of Lost, what the hell's that island, It's usually followed by no, seriously, what the hell's that island? Why so many mysteries? What is it about mystery that I seem to be drawn to? And I was thinking about this, what to talk about at TED. When I talked to the kind rep from TED, and I said, listen, you know, what should I talk about? He said, don't worry about it, just be profound. And I took enormous comfort in that, so thank you if you're here. I was trying to think, what do I talk about? It's a good question. Why do I do so much stuff that involves mystery? And I started trying to figure it out. And I started thinking about, well, why do I do any of what I do? And I started thinking about my grandfather. I loved my grandfather. Harry Kelvin was his name, my mother's father. He died in 1986. He was an amazing guy. And one of the reasons he was amazing, after World War II, he began an electronics company. He started selling surplus parts, kits to schools and stuff. So he had this incredible curiosity. As a kid, I saw him come over to me with radios and telephones and all sorts of things, and he'd open them up, he'd unscrew them, and reveal the inner workings, which many of us, I'm sure, take for granted, but it's an amazing gift to give a kid, to open up this thing and show how it works and why it works and what it is. He was the ultimate deconstructor in many ways. And my grandfather was the kind of guy who would not only take things apart, but he got me interested in all sorts of different odd crafts, like you know, printing, like the letterpress. I'm obsessed with printing. I'm obsessed with silk screening and bookbinding and box making. And when I was a kid, I was always like taking apart boxes and stuff. And last night in the hotel, I took apart the Kleenex box. I was just looking at it, and I'm telling you this. It's a beautiful thing, I swear to God. I mean, when you look at it, look at the box and you sort of see how it works. Reeves is here, and I met him years ago at a book fair. He does pop-up books, and I'm obsessed with like engineering of paper, but like the scoring of it, the printing of it, where the thing gets glued, you know, the registration marks for the ink. I just love boxes. My grandfather was sort of the guy who, you know, kind of got me into all sorts of these things. He would also supply me with tools. He was this amazing encourager, this patron sort of, to make stuff. And he got me a Super 8 camera when I was 10 years old. And in 1976, that was sort of an anomaly to be a 10-year-old kid that had access to a camera. And, you know, he was so generous. I couldn't believe it. He wasn't doing it entirely without some manipulation. I mean, I would call him and I'd be like, listen, Grandpa, I really need this camera. You don't understand. This is like, I really, you know, I want to make movies. I'll get invited to TED one day. This is like, and you know, and my grandmother was the greatest because she'd be like, you know, like she'd get on the phone and she'd be like, Harry, it's better than the drugs. He should be doing this. She was fantastic. So I found myself getting this stuff thanks to her assist, and suddenly, you know, I had a synthesizer when I was 14 years old. This kind of stuff, and it let me make things, which to me was sort of the dream. He sort of humored my obsessions with other things too, like magic. The thing is, we go to this magic store in New York City called Lieutenant's Magic. It was this great magic store. It was a crappy little building in Midtown, but you'd be in the elevator would open, there'd be this little small magic store, you'd be in the magic store, and it was a magical place. So I got all these sort of magic tricks. Oh, here, I'll show you this kind of thing. So it'd be like, you know, right? Which is good, but now I can't move. Now I have to do the rest of the thing. I'm like this. I'm like, oh wow, look at my computer over there. Anyway. So one of the things that I bought at the magic store was this. Tannen's Mystery Magic Box. The premise behind the Mystery Magic Box was the following. $15 buys you $50 worth of magic, which is a savings. Now, I bought this decades ago. I'm not kidding. If you look at this, you'll see it's never been opened. But I've had this forever. Now, I was looking at this, it was in my office, and as it always is on the shelf, and I was thinking, why have I not opened this? And why have I kept it? Because I'm not a pack rat, I don't keep everything, but for some reason I haven't opened this box. And I felt like there was a key to this somehow. I'm talking about something at TED that I hadn't discussed before and bored people elsewhere. So I thought, maybe there's something with this. I started thinking about it, and there's this giant question mark. I love the design, for what it's worth, of this thing. And I started thinking, why haven't I opened it? And I realized that I haven't opened it because it represents something important to me. It represents my grandfather. Am I allowed to cry at TED? Because, you know, I'm not gonna. But the thing is that it represents infinite possibility. It represents hope. It represents potential. And what I love about this box, and what I realize I sort of do in whatever it is that I do, is I I find myself drawn to infinite possibility, that sense of potential, and I realize that mystery is the catalyst for imagination. Now, it's not the most groundbreaking idea, but when I started to think that maybe there are times when mystery is more important than knowledge, I started getting interested in this. And so I started thinking about Lost and the stuff that we do, and I realized, oh my God, like mystery boxes are everywhere in what I do. And how, in the creation of Lost, Damon Lindelof and I, who created the show with me, we were basically tasked with creating this series that we had very little time to do. We had 11 and a half weeks to write it, cast it, crew it, shoot it, cut it, post it, turn it in, 2-hour pilot. So it was not a lot of time. And that sense of possibility, what could this thing be? There was no time to develop it. I'm sure you're all familiar with those people who tell you what you can't do, what you should change. And there was no time for that, which is kind of amazing. Again, that's not Eddie's hand, that's Tom. So Tom's playing two roles.
At about that point in the video, I'm sitting there on the couch in the hotel room, I realized what my course had started lacking, which was a mystery box. And I knew that if we could create mystery boxes, we could possibly increase engagement. And so it worked at the TV level because Rachel and I would sit there after the show. We had recorded the show, and we would go through. I would spend hours going through frame by frame his show because he actually put some little messages in there, pictures that were helping you try to figure out what was happening on this arm, what was going on. And so I would spend hours just going through this, and the commercials that were in between the shows were really his commercials for like the plane company that crashed, and you could actually go to their website and it would give you information. So it brought this TV viewing experience to a completely different level and created a whole bunch of engagement. And I realized that my class had got sort of dull, my course got sort of dull, so I needed to increase the engagement. And I figured, well, maybe I could do it through creating mystery boxes, which is what was really, I thought, lacking. So the next video that the next video that came on right after this was this one. And
today I'd like to show you the future of the way we make things. I believe that soon our buildings and machines will be self-assembling, replicating, and repairing themselves. So I'm going to show you what I believe is the current state of manufacturing, and then compare that to some natural systems. So in the current state of manufacturing, we have skyscrapers, 2.5 years, 500,000 to 1 million parts, fairly complex, new exciting technologies in steel, concrete, glass. We have exciting machines that can take us into space, 5 years, 2.5 million parts. But on the other side, if you look at the natural systems, we have proteins that have 2 million types, can fold in 10,000 nanoseconds, or DNA with 3 million base pairs we can replicate in roughly an hour. So there's all of this complexity in our natural systems, but they're extremely efficient, far more efficient than anything we can build, far more complex than anything we can build. They're far more efficient in terms of energy. They hardly ever make mistakes, and they can repair themselves for longevity. So there's something super interesting about natural systems, and if we can translate that into our built environment, then there's some exciting potential for the way that we build things. And I think the key to that is self-assembly. So if we want to utilize self-assembly in our physical environment, I think there's 4 key factors. The first is that we need to decode all of the complexity of what we want to build, so our buildings and machines. We need to decode that into simple sequences, basically the DNA of how our buildings work. Then we need new programmable parts that can take that sequence and use that to fold up or reconfigure. We need some energy that's going to allow that to activate, allow our parts to be able to fold up from the program. And we need some type of error correction, redundancy, to guarantee that we have successfully built what we want. So I'm going to show you a number of projects that my colleagues and I at MIT are working on to achieve this self-assembling future. The first 2 are the Macrobot and Decibot. So these projects are large-scale reconfigurable robots, 8-foot, 12-foot long proteins. They're embedded with mechanical electrical devices, sensors. You decode what you want to fold up into a sequence of angles, so -120, -120, 0, 0, 120, -120, something like that. So a sequence of angles or turns, and you send that sequence through the string. Each unit takes its message, so -120, It rotates to that, checks if it got there, and then passes it to its neighbor. So these are the brilliant scientists, engineers, designers that worked on.
Now, as I'm sitting there watching that, I'm thinking about the studies we're doing in our biology for majors course. And what we were finding was a lot of the students that were sitting in the biology for majors course were not majors. And they were seeming to be a little disconnected. And here, what you saw was a guy from MIT creating robots, creating machines that would build themselves. And his idea for it came from the way proteins are made in the biological system. And it was driving his idea. So he had someone in engineering and math and all that at MIT that then was using the biology that they had learned to drive this idea. And so I started talking about these things in my class, and it got a little more engaging. We did see a shift in our 1406 biology for majors course, and now we do have most of the majors of the course, but at that time we didn't. So I was trying to get them engaged as well. And so we come back, and I'm thinking about what can I do to create mystery boxes, to bring some of these ideas into the classroom that go beyond and talk about all these different disciplines and how they're working together and how some of these ideas came out of the area of biology that drive these major ideas at these schools. And started watching TED TV because that was the first time I was exposed to it. So I just started watching them. I watch them all the time. I figured I was going to get in trouble in my office because when I was doing work, they were on. They're still on. I'm listening to them. And I shut my door so people, get disturbed by it, but it's not being rude. I'm just listening to these videos and I'm thinking, how can I take the information that's there and use it to stimulate some idea that they've done or what they've done? Came across this video about functional fixedness, and I'm going to move it forward.
So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, take a look at this. This is called the candle problem. Some of you might have seen this before. It's created in 1945 by a psychologist named Carl Duncker. Carl Duncker has created this experiment that's used in a whole variety of experiments in behavioral science. And here's how it works. Suppose I'm the experimenter. I bring you into a room. I give you a candle, some thumbtacks, and some matches. And I say to you, your job is to attach the candle to the wall so the wax doesn't drip onto the table. Now, what would you do? Many people begin trying to thumbtack the candle to the wall. Doesn't work. Some people, and I saw somebody kind of make the motion over here, some people have a great idea where they light the match, melt the side of the candle, try to adhere it to the wall. It's an awesome idea. Doesn't work. And eventually, after 5 or 10 minutes, most people figure out the solution, which you can see here. The key is to overcome what's called functional fixedness. You look at that box and you see it only as a receptacle for the tacks, but it can also have this other function as a platform for the candle. Candle problem. Now, I want to tell you about an experiment using the candle problem done by a scientist named Sam Glucksberg, who's now at Princeton University in the US. This shows the power of incentives. Here's what he did. He gathered his participants and he said, I'm going to time you how quickly you can solve this problem. To one group, he said, I'm going to time you to establish norms, averages, for how long it typically takes someone to solve this sort of problem. Someone to solve this sort of problem.
So I saw this video, and I like this whole thinking outside the box, but how do you teach it? How do you teach critical thinking? How do you get people to open their eyes to what's around them, use what's around them to solve problems? And I knew that the literature was saying when our students go on and they go to a job, I don't care if they go from 4-year school or 2-year school or graduate school, the employers are saying that they have trouble with critical thinking and working as a team. And this is sort of what I think is critical thinking, solving these problems. And so we talk a lot about DNA function, where you use DNA to replicate DNA and use DNA to make proteins. And before you can even start talking about that in class, you have to have the basic idea and understanding of what the structure of DNA is. Because structure and function go hand in hand. And getting the students to learn the structure, to me, was a big task. And I could go over it and tell them what it is, but it wasn't enough. They weren't really learning it. So I thought about what we could do and what I could do, and came up with an idea, and at first it was dealing with candy. You've seen these before. I wanted them to build a model of DNA, but I didn't want them to take a model that already had the parts, a label, and they just piece it together. You don't learn much there. So before I first started with candy, it was a mess, and then we came up with the idea, well, let's just buy a bunch of junk, stuff that they wouldn't think would make, you could use to make DNA, like nuts and bolts and O-rings, and electrical equipment, wiring equipment, and wire and string, and we're going to throw it into a box, and we're going to ask them to build a model of DNA out of it, and they have to represent all the parts of the DNA, so all the phosphates and sugars and the bases and the bonds that are formed. And so that was the first part, and I challenged them to do that. And they didn't know what was in the box. I popped the box off, and so I made a joke out and said, build me a model of DNA. You have this class period. And by the way, you also need to take and teach the model, or use the model to teach me what the structure of DNA is. So I reversed the classroom. People have been talking about flipping the classroom for years. And that's what was going on. Flip the classroom, well, they're going to have to teach it back to me, and they have to use their model and point out every little thing. And if they were missing something, so if they had a phosphate and a sugar linked together, but they didn't have the covalent bond, I'd ask them, where's your covalent bond? And then they'd have to go back and rebuild it, put the covalent bond in there, and then reteach it to me. And as we went through this process, the engagement within the group, working as a group, and also working with me, just went up drastically. And it seemed like they learned what the structure of DNA was, and they have a little bit better understanding of now how to use it in terms of the function. How does it function the way it does with the structure? And so it was just a box of junk, stuff that you don't normally think you could build something out of. And we basically forced them to build a model with that junk and think outside the box, sort of like what you need to do with that candle problem. So, came across this video, and this is my third favorite video that I've seen on TV. And I'm not telling you guys to shut up and listen, but that's what this video is talking about. And I'm going to play it, and then we'll talk about it.
Everything I do, and everything I do professionally, my life has been shaped by 7 years of work as a young man in Africa. From 1971 to 1977, I look young, but I'm not.
Turn up.
I worked in Zambia, Kenya, Ivory Coast, Algeria, Somalia, in projects of technical cooperation with African countries. I worked for an Italian NGO. And every single project that we set up in Africa failed. And I was distraught. I thought, age 21, that we Italians were good people and we were doing good work in Africa. Instead, everything we touched, we killed. Our first project, the one that has inspired my first book, Ripples from the Zambezi, was a project where we Italians decided to teach Zambian people how to grow food. So we arrived there with Italian seeds in southern Zambia, in this absolutely magnificent valley, going down to the Zambezi River, and we taught the local people how to grow Italian tomatoes and zucchini. And of course, the local people had absolutely no interest in doing that, so we paid them to come and work, and sometimes they would show up. And we were amazed that the local people in such a fertile valley would not have any agriculture. And, but instead of asking them how come they were not growing anything, we simply said, thank God we're here. Just in the nick of time to save the Zambian people from starvation. And of course, everything in Africa grew beautifully, and we had these magnificent tomatoes. In Italy, a tomato would grow to this size, in Zambia to this size. And we could not believe. And we were telling the Zambians, look how easy agriculture is. When the tomatoes were nice and ripe and red, overnight, some 200 hippos came out from the river and they ate everything. And we said to the Zambians, my God, the hippos. And then Zambia said, yes, that's why we have modern culture here. Why didn't you tell us? You never asked. I thought it was only us Italians blundering around Africa. But then I saw what the Americans were doing, what the English were doing, what the French were doing. And after seeing what they were doing, I became quite proud of our project in Zambia. Because you see, at least we fed the hippos.
So, looking at this video, what I realized I wasn't doing, and what I didn't give the opportunity to do is where I shut up in class and I let my students talk. And I listen to what they say. And I start looking at how they're thinking, how are they analyzing problems, how are they working as a team, and then start trying to help them. And so I started doing this more, giving them more opportunities to do that. And thinking ahead, I was trying to figure out how I could develop the course more in that direction. What could we do to do that? And we'll get to that. But this is my third favorite video. J.J. Abrams was second, and the last one I'll show you. It's my favorite. So, Linda and I would walk around campuses and we would talk. We kick around ideas. And we come back with more ideas. We forgot a lot of them by the time we got back. But we did have this one idea, try and increase engagement, try to turn the course more into an inquiry-based course, where students are doing more of the work. We give them more time to do work. We let them problem solve, work as teams more. And what we were doing at this point in 1406, our biology for majors, was almost opposite. It was a good start. It wasn't the direction I'd like to head in. And so I think Linda was on board with let's try to take it in a different direction. And so we started talking about what we could do and include some of this stuff into the course. And when you walk into a traditional science lab, what happens is you're given a set of directions that you follow. And to us, that really wasn't science. And some courses really lend themselves well to doing it. They have to do that. But the biology for majors course is a great opportunity there where we can change it. It doesn't work for all courses. It won't work for all courses. But what we really wanted to do is take that course, try to increase engagement, try to increase opportunity for critical thinking, try to increase the amount of teamwork, and give them some time to be able to do that, which would cause us to revamp the whole course. And so what we originally had was that sort of cookie cutter stuff. You're going to bake cookies and you get the outcome, you know what it is. And what we ended up trying to do was create these mystery boxes. At least I know I was. I don't know if I was clear with Linda. I think she understood what I was doing. Try and create these mystery boxes. No, sometimes I don't, my ideas don't come out real well. I can't express them real well. So I didn't, no, I would never call you.
I'll see you later.
I call you a genius for not doing. So I wanted to shut up and listen to my students. I wanted to give them opportunities to think outside the box. And I knew, and Linda knew, and everybody got involved with this. Helen knew. We eventually wrote Helen into it. And we all knew that the format and selling it was going to be key. And Kitty was involved in it, getting money. And so we knew we needed money. We knew we needed to revamp the course. We knew it was going to be a challenge because what we're going to do is we're going to take in what the students have been doing for 12 years, we're going to switch it. We're going to turn it completely in the opposite direction, and we are going to break all the rules that they are used to. And hopefully they won't revolt. Hopefully the administration won't revolt, and other faculty won't revolt, and hopefully it'll get off the ground soar. So I put this in here. This is a lab that I think Anita, Linda, and myself had wrote. And it was a really good lab, but again, when you look at it, it's a step-by-step procedure on how to accomplish something. And it's, to us, it's science, but it's not really science. Science is about creating a hypothesis and a method to test it, and then getting the data and analyzing it, and then drawing conclusions and going back and revamping what you did. And this didn't really, it was a good start, but it didn't really do what we wanted to do. So we started revamping the course, we started revamping the labs. And what we have now is a lab. When the students walk in, it looks more like this. So we have an introduction and a sort of a problem for them to solve. They're going to have to work in teams to do it. And then we had some lit review. So they actually had to go out to the literature like a scientist would and do some lit review and get some data from the literature and start formulating a question and then a hypothesis. And we gave them an area to put in the hypothesis, and then, they have to have our approval before they move forward. Well, in real science, it's not linear like this. What you have is maybe if you work on your methods a little bit and drive your hypothesis formation, then you go back and work on your methods. But for us, we want them to have it approved in a certain order. And so the students all had to get our approval on the hypothesis and then the methods, and that allowed us to interact with the students and give them feedback on what was good and what needed to be improved and guided, instead of just having them just have at it. We knew we'd have some issues if they just had at it and have control of it. And so all of these areas, the results, the discussion, the conclusion, is they have to get approval on all of them except for the conclusion. The conclusion you can do on your own. But what it allowed us really to do now was become more of a mentor, and they became more of an apprentice. I think that's a really good position. We're growing very quickly. We have a lot of students. It's very hard to work with all those students and give them the feedback that they need. It's hard to get them to come to you. But this system right here forces them. If you do it the way that I do it, I think we all do it. Helen does it. Linda does it. It forces them to have to interact with you, and it forces them to have to work in teams, interact with each other, and think critically. And it's tedious, it's hard, it's really a challenge, but you really can get an idea of how the student's thinking and help guide them through how to think about their thinking, metacognition part. And so, it was going to be, I knew it, I think a tough sell for some people, especially the students. We needed money. So we had to sell to try to get the money. And so we tried a couple times to get grants and get them. And then finally, we sold it to Dr. Lane, and he gave us funding for it. We knew that we need to sell it to other faculty members. Linda and I were sort of on the front end of it. So we had to sell it to another faculty member, so we sold it to Helen McDowell. She,
So easy mark.
Easy sell.
Easy mark.
Easy sell.
Easy mark.
Easy sell.
Short done.
So she was on board right away. She wanted to be involved in it.
Love it.
And so it was great. But then we had this other population that we all have that's probably going to be a little bit harder sell, which is the adjuncts that teach the course. They work hard, but this is going to require a lot more work, a lot of detail, and we're concerned about being able to sell it to, at least I was, to the adjuncts. So we ended up putting together a professional development program. We got some funding to do that, and that's still under it's in the works, I should say, that we are still working on that, because this is sort of a unique method, lots of times, for teaching. It's going on all over the country, but for here, it seems to be a unique method to this degree. And so we were concerned about the adjuncts. So we put together that professional development program, and we tried to sell it. We sold it to a lot of adjuncts. I don't know if we sold it to every adjunct, but we sold it to them. And last semester, we implemented it. And I thought it went really well. I thought we had a lot of buy-in. I think the students really got a lot more out of it. I did. They had good comments about it. The students liked it. They seemed to be engaged. They were working as teams to solve problems. Critical thinking, we saw it change. There was an opportunity for them to think about it and you to give them the feedback. And so it was good. But I knew the sell was going to be hard. And I come across this video, and this is one of my favorite videos. I think it's probably my favorite video so far. And I think the way you approach things and the way you interact with people is very important. And there's certain methods that work, certain methods that don't work in my eyes. And I never really understood why the first day I would go into class and I'd tell my students why I taught. Why do I do what I could do? I could do a bunch of other things. I know I could. But why do I do what I do? I always started with the why. And I come across this video and it made me realize why I was doing what I was doing. And I really now knew I needed to do more of this.
How do you explain when things don't go as we assume? Or better, how do you explain when others are able to achieve things that seem to defy all of the assumptions? For example, why is Apple so innovative? Year after year after year after year, they're more innovative than all their competition. And yet, they're just a computer company. They're just like everyone else. They have the same access to the same talent, the same agencies, the same consultants, the same media. Then why is it that they seem to have something different? Why is it that Martin Luther King led the civil rights movement? He wasn't the only man who suffered in a pre-civil rights America, and he certainly wasn't the only great orator of the day. Why him? And why is it that the Wright brothers were able to figure out controlled powered manned flight when there were certainly other teams who were better qualified, better funded, and they didn't achieve powered manned flight, and the Wright brothers beat them to it? There's something else at play here. About 3.5 years ago, I made a discovery, and this discovery profoundly changed my view on how I thought the world worked, and it even profoundly changed the way in which I operate in it. As it turns out, there's a pattern. As it turns out, all the great and inspiring leaders and organizations in the world, whether it's Apple or Martin Luther King or the Wright brothers, they all think, act, and communicate the exact same way, and it's the complete opposite to everyone else. All I did was codify it. And it's probably the world's simplest idea. I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Nah. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we're better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. But as I said before, Apple's just a computer company. There's nothing that distinguishes them structurally from any of their competitors. Their competitors are all equally qualified to make all of these products. In fact, they tried. A few years ago, Gateway came out with flat-screen TVs. They're eminently qualified to make flat-screen TVs. They've been making flat-screen monitors for years. Nobody bought one. And Dell came out with MP3 players and PDAs. And they make great quality products, and they can make perfectly well-designed products. And nobody bought one. In fact, talking about it now, we can't even imagine buying an MP3 player from Dell. Why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company? But we do it every day. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The goal is not to do business with everybody who needs what you have. The goal is to do business with people who believe what you believe. Here's the best part. None of what I'm telling you is my opinion. It's all grounded in the tenets of biology, not psychology, biology. If you look at a cross-section of the human brain looking from the top down, what you see is the human brain is actually broken into three major components that correlate perfectly with the golden circle. Our newest brain, our Homo sapien brain, our neocortex, corresponds with the what level. The neocortex is responsible for all of our rational and analytical thought and language. The middle two sections make up our limbic brains, and our limbic brains are responsible for all of our feelings, like trust and loyalty. It's also responsible for all human behavior, all decision-making, and it has no capacity for language. In other words, when we communicate from the outside in, yes, people can understand vast amounts of complicated information like features and benefits and facts and figures. It just doesn't drive behavior. When we communicate from the inside out, we're talking directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do. This is where gut decisions come from. You know, sometimes you can give somebody all the facts and your figures, and they say, I know what all the facts and details say, but it just doesn't feel right. Why would we use that verb? It doesn't feel right. Because the part of the brain that controls decision-making doesn't control language. And the best we can muster up is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Or sometimes you say, they were first. People. The first 6 hours, I stood in line for 6 hours, was because of what they believed about the world and how they wanted everybody to see them. They were first. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So let me give you a famous example, a famous failure and a famous success of the law of diffusion of innovation. First, the famous failure. It's a commercial example. As we said before a second ago, the recipe for success is money and the right people and the right marketing conditions, right? You should have success then. Look at TiVo. From the time TiVo came out about 8 or 9 years ago to this current day, they are the single highest quality product on the market. Hands down, there is no dispute. They were extremely well funded. Market conditions were fantastic. I mean, we use TiVo as a verb. I TiVo stuff on my piece of junk Time Warner DVR all the time. But TiVo is a commercial failure. They've never made money. And when they went IPO, their stock was at about $30 or $40 and then plummeted, and it's never traded above 10. In fact, I don't think it's even traded above 6, except for a couple of little spikes. Because you see, when TiVo launched their product, they told us all what they had. They said, we have a product that pauses live TV, skips commercials, rewinds live TV, and memorizes your viewing habits without you even asking. And the cynical majority said, we don't believe you, we don't need it, we don't like it, you're scaring us. What if they had said, if you're the kind of person who likes to have total control over every aspect of your life, boy, do we have a product for you. It pauses live TV, skips commercials, memorizes your viewing habits, etc., etc. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, and what you do simply serves as the proof of what you believe. Now let me give you a successful example of the law of diffusion of innovation. In the summer of 1963, 250,000 people showed up on the Mall in Washington to hear Dr. King speak. They sent out no invitations, and there was no website to check the date. How do you do that? Well, Dr. King wasn't the only man in America who was a great orator. He wasn't the only man in America who suffered in a pre-civil rights America. In fact, some of his ideas were bad. But he had a gift. He didn't go around telling people what needed to change in America. He went around and told people what he believed. I believe, I believe, I believe, he told people. And people who believed what he believed took his cause and they made it their own, and they told people. And some of those people created structures to get the word out to even more people. And lo and behold, 250,000 people showed up on the right day, on the right time to hear him speak. How many of them showed up for him? 0. They showed up for themselves. It's what they believed about America that got them to travel on a bus for 8 hours to stand in the sun in Washington in the middle of August. It's what they believed, and it wasn't about black versus white. 25% of the audience was white. Dr. King believed that there are 2 types of laws in this world, those that are made by a higher authority and those that are made by man. And not until all the laws that are made by man are consistent with the laws that are made by the higher authority will we live in a just world. It just so happens that the civil rights movement was the perfect thing to help him bring his cause to life. We followed not for him, but for ourselves. And by the way, he gave the I have a dream speech, not the I have a plan speech. Listen to politicians now with their comprehensive 12-point plans. They're not inspiring anybody. Because there are leaders and there are those who lead. Leaders hold a position of power or authority, but those who lead inspire us. Whether they're individuals or organizations, we follow those who lead, not because we have to, but because we want to. We follow those who lead, not for them, but for ourselves. And it's those who start with why that have the ability to inspire those around them or find others who inspire them. Thank you very much.
So the why part, delivering it through the why is, to me, important. Delivery is very important. And we shop at Sam's Club, and I went to Sam's Club this last weekend. And I hate when you go in and you go to check out, they still want you to do more business. You want to buy the next upgraded membership. And I will completely shut them down. I won't listen to them. No, I just want to check out. And I hate to do it because the people are just getting paid a little bit to do their job. But they always want more. And so I go to Sam's Club to get a whole bunch of stuff. We haven't stocked our shelves in probably a couple of weeks, so we need a whole lot of food. And I go to the ring out, check out, and the woman who's there, she says hello, and she just starts checking. Didn't say anything about this membership, which they normally do. This is good. She's checking me out. She's like, do you usually buy a lot of stuff here? And I said, yeah. She said, you like saving money, right? And I said, yeah. She said, you usually spend over $250 when you go? I said, yeah, pretty much. Well, you should upgrade to our next membership. You could save your membership fees if you keep spending like this at Sam's Club. And she had gotten her foot in the door. I started listening to what she had to say, and she really started with why. And to me, it's important to start with why. And we were talking about how we were going to sell this to our students, which was the biggest sell, was change in the course. We really started with the why. We started with the why. And it seemed to have worked. And if you look at all of these videos, I've shown you 5 videos, this last one, but 4 other ones. If you look at the videos and how they started, each one of them, except for one, so 3 out of 4, started with why. Why I've done what I've done, why we do what we do. And so I didn't realize it until I actually sat down and put the presentation together, and last night it hit me. All of them were starting, except for one, with why. And so I know this isn't going to work for everyone. Some people may like it, may not like it. It will work in some courses, probably won't work in other courses. But this is sort of where I get my ideas. And I get a lot of ideas from TED TV. I don't show any of these videos to anybody really. I may send them to my wife, I may send them to people, but I don't really say too much about it. Yeah, but they've helped me sort of think about revamping the course and trying to increase engagement, critical thinking, teamwork. This semester, we're really looking for some data, heavily going after getting some data. We got an IRB, we're looking at critical thinking, teamwork. We're looking at engagement. Linda is coming into Helen's class and my class in coding, the engagement between the students and also between the professor. And when Ron had asked me to do this, it was sort of last minute, and I said, sure, I'd like to do it. As I had said to him, next semester, do you have an opening so we could talk about our lab? We still would like to do that if we could, how we've changed the lab to make it more engaging, more based on critical thinking and teamwork. But I wanted to get some data. So what I did, I think you talked to me just before the weekend, so I started collecting some data on engagement. And what I considered engagement to be was anytime my students were coming and talking to me outside of the classroom that day, I would record the number of students that came to see me each day. And it was mostly the students that were enrolled in the course, but there were some students who were enrolled in the course last semester that came to me to talk with me as well. So I recorded the data for 9 days. And so this is probably what you're looking for. Yeah, it's a great idea, but does it work? And again, this is what we're trying to do. Mystery boxes, shut up, listen, give them that feedback. Here's the engagement data. So 9 days recorded from Monday 2nd to Thursday 12th. Monday, outside of class, I had 7 students come see me. Tuesday, 13 students. 4 students on Wednesday, 17 on Thursday. 18 on Monday, 29 students outside of class came to see me on Tuesday, 10th.
And then you got sick the next day?
I got sick the next day. I just called in. I couldn't handle it anymore. So I was out of the office. And then Thursday at 11. So if you divide those numbers by 9, on average, I'm meeting and talking not about football or basketball or fishing with students. I'm talking about coursework or previous coursework. An average of 11 students per day. And if you take it, the averages out, it goes up to 12, almost 13, average 13 students a day. 4 of these students are, actually 3 of them were from the semester before. They were actually working, they volunteered their own time to work on another project that I am interested in. So they came back and they're doing work for basically free. More science work, that's more engagement that had rolled over from the last semester. So my goal personally was to increase engagement. Right now, if it continues like this, I don't know how long I can do this. Seeing 29 students a day outside of the classroom is a lot of students to work with. So sometimes I think the monster's been created. It may be sort of out of control. I've been talking with Helen to figure out how we get it under control. But there's so.
What was the average number you saw before you started this engagement?
Depends on what time it was, because we have what we call a chemotaxis project. And the way I was doing chemotaxis was similar to the way the labs are set up now. So during that time, I was meeting, I don't remember the exact data, but I think it was somewhere towards the end of the semester when the project was getting close to the due time. I was seeing maybe 10 students or so on average. And the average amount of time the group was spending with me to get approval on the project outside the classroom was 3 hours. It was up to 6 hours. I sat with some groups for 6 hours in the hallway talking about it. And we had actually presented this at SCST a couple of years ago. And so there was engagement. So I had a couple students coming, but nowhere close to this. Nowhere close to this. So.
Can you talk a little bit more about when you're in the classroom, or even when they come to see you, they're trying to resolve a problem, but I know that there are challenges that the professor faces because you don't want to give them the answer.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit more about that? And how that impacts what you're trying to get at?
Yeah, the students and the professors, they both get frustrated in this process. It is a very tedious process. You gotta be very careful with what you say, how you say it to the student, because we don't wanna give them the answer. If we do, we've gone back pretty much to the model that we had before. So everything has to be very calculated. So when a student asks a question, matter of fact, in the beginning of our lab manual, we actually wrote a brand new lab manual from scratch in one semester to do what we needed to do here. It was Linda, Helen, and myself. We worked a lot on it. And in the beginning of it, we have a welcome letter. When we come up with this idea, have this welcome letter and sort of expose them to, let them know what they're getting into. That when they come to us during the lab and ask a question, we're going to answer their question with a question. They're going to have to think about it. We're trying to get them to think about their own thinking and make good decisions and think outside the box and work on that critical thinking, be able to go back and work with their team. And so when they come to you, and this is what you're asking, right? When they come to you, it's almost like a game of volleyball or tennis where they're going to throw something at you and try to get an answer. And this is the way it starts out. And you then ask them another question about their question. And then they'll ask you a question, you ask them a question. And eventually, at some point, you have to just say stop and really look at what I've asked you to do, and then come out, think about it, come back up. You have to put a stop to it. Otherwise, they'll just do what I call fishing. They'll just start throwing out all these questions and try to figure out what I'm looking for. And what they don't realize is I don't know what we're looking for, because they're designing their experiment. They're coming up with their own question, their own hypothesis, and they're going to have to create a method to get the data. And they think for some reason, I guess it's because they've been in this mode from K through 12, that I have this answer, and this is what I'm looking for. I don't. And so you have that sort of point where it's a breaking point. The first lab, maybe the second lab, they do this, and then they suddenly realize that, oh wait, there really is no answer. They don't know the answer because the question is new. It's something that they have to test. If they don't know the answer to it, they don't know the answer to it. They actually have to do the work. So the challenge is trying to get them to go back and think about their thinking and not do the fishing, and also not make them mad, right? It's very easy to make them mad. They're going to get frustrated. And also not get myself so frustrated that I just give up as well. Or I get rude with them. We don't want to do that. Once you do that, you've lost them. They're gone. They may not come back the whole semester to you. And so we go through that challenge of what's the right question, what's the right way to word it, and then you go through this tedious process of we're going to do this little dance and try to get the right answer, and then you have to realize what's going on and shut them down and send them off and say, oh, you need to think about that and come back. And what happens is when they get that signature, it's not a big deal. It really isn't. What it means is you can move forward and they think it's like getting a huge reward. They are excited. They will start dancing, their hands go up, they woo-hoo, and because we've gone back and forth. I've sent them back to think about it, they come back, go back and think about it, and they know that it's going to have to be worded correctly. There's no right or wrong hypothesis. It's testable one is not. It's not testable. It's not correct. It's not incorrect. Is it testable? And once they get to that point, then I approve it. They get excited, and you see they're really engaged. They're really excited about it. So you see things like that happening. But getting to that point sometimes is a real challenge because they're not used to it, and professors are not used to it lots of times. It's just a new technique of teaching.
It's really, just to add something to that, it's really difficult not to just give them the answer. Because that would be the easiest thing for us to do, is just tell them what the answer is. And especially when you've taught back, because our classes are back to back, so that second 3-hour class, you're exhausted answering a million questions. And so what I've found, for me anyway, I always don't speak right away. So that gives me time to think about what I want to say back to the student. Or my usual question is, what do you think?
Yeah.
And they're like, really?
I'll say, there's no right or wrong here. What is the best thing to do? What is the best path to take? Think about it. You know, it's little things that you don't think are going to frustrate you. You think they're going to get right away. And like when they need to make 2 solutions to test, and they have to be the same volume. So if they're using 55 milliliters in one, they need to use 55 milliliters in another. But they're leaving something out. So if they have glucose and yeast they're testing together, but they want to see if glucose alone is making CO2, and they use 50 milliliters of glucose, they use 50 another, and 5 of yeast. Now that one's at 55 milliliters, and they're leaving the yeast out, but we can't leave it out. You have to replace it with something. And you ask them, well, how are you going to make this the same? They have a hard time realizing that I just have to add 5 milliliters of water over to this one to give you the same volume. The water is not going to have an effect on outcome. And we really, one of the things that's a shock when we do this is the things that we think they come to us and understand, they really don't. And we're supposed to be working on critical thinking and teamwork and all these great ideas, and they come to us and they're still wanting to measure things in the lab in ounces and cups. And I'll ask them, are we cooking or are we running a lab here? And then they'll, oh yeah, milliliters, we got measuring grams. And they don't understand concentration. So things that we would normally say, make this concentration, we move on like we did with the other lab. Now they have to do it on their own. Think about how are they going to make a 10% concentration. Or if they're going to test glucose and sucrose to see if there's a difference, that they need to use the same concentration, but they will give me every word that they can come up with to try to compare apples with apples, but they won't know the concentration. I've had the viscosity of the solution, I've had the density of the solution, and
Molarity.
Molarity.
Yeah,
molarity,
I thought the chemistry teacher would be proud of us that we got that.
And I think sometimes, well, maybe it's the science. So I'll say, okay, what's the difference? You can have a cup of milk here and a cup of milk here. What's the difference between the milk? They'll say, there's no difference. I said, but you can have different types of milk. You can have the same volume, but different. What's different? Because I figured they had to go through lunch line at some point and realize they had to make a decision between 1, 2, and % whole milk. And it takes them a while to get it. So some of these ideas that I thought they knew already, we're really seeing that they don't. And they get hung up on these little things. Which then, again, we have to go through this critical thinking process.
I just think all of this, especially the way that you have it tied together, is so powerful, because I think that when people don't have meaning, or they don't know what the meaning is for why they're doing what they're doing, EDUC 1300 is a perfect example. Counseling workshops, we have all these wonderful counseling workshops, student success workshops, that if they would just come, they would be so blessed with all the information we have. But they don't come. And we're trying to figure out how can we help them find the meaning in it, because we know it's important, we know they could benefit from it, but if you don't do the why, I love that video too, but if you don't do the why and the mystery box, what is it really going to be about and all that, I just think this is powerful that you can use in a course or with the counselor group. I mean, you can use it with anything.
Yeah, these are, to me, they're basic techniques, and when you look at them, you think, yeah, that's a basic technique. But I realized in my courses, they were basic, but I had gotten so far away from using these basic techniques that I was the one coming in, like the Italian man, saying, we're here, I'm going to help you. And
Right.
that's not what I really want to do in my course. So, yeah.
And when you take an interest to stop and listen to what they have to say, and you're doing it in a real interesting way because of the science class, you're just listening and you're getting so much insight into the way their brain works. But in other areas too, just listening to find out, you've got such a variety of people in your workshop or your classroom. They're all coming at different levels, and if you're not listening to what they know and what they don't know, you have no idea where to start with them.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
There's a parallel with literature in the sense that a work of art or a poem is a kind of a mystery box if you choose to present it that way. And it's useful to begin a discussion of literature with the question, why do people write? And if you ask the students, why do you write? You follow that up with, why does anyone write? Very often they'll say, well, to express themselves, or they'll say to be creative. But very rarely will they say, which is what we're going for, to figure something out.
Yeah.
And that's why artists create art and write. Shakespeare doesn't know what he necessarily wants to conclude. He's trying to figure it out by writing Hamlet. Right? And so that's a way that this parallels with one way that literature can derivatively be taught, so that an analysis that a student writes of a poem, let's say, is a testable hypothesis. And the same poem, the same words in the poem can be used to demonstrate the validity of contrary interpretations. So it's a matter of what's persuasive and not what's right or wrong, which parallels what you're getting.
That's what we do in science. Try to figure out why.
So are you doing what the artist does, or is the artist doing what you do? That's an interesting discussion in the class.
Perhaps they're both very creative processes,
I think we are.
or can be.
They can be.
Well, Joe started off as an art student, so.
Yeah.
So it's the artistry there.
Any other questions or comments? Well, Joe, thank you so much.